So, was Charlie Ward blackballed? Coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back for more Common Sense Logical Reason. And as always, thank y'all for watching. Now, Charlie Ward went to Florida State from 1989 to 1993. He was a dual sport athlete. He played basketball and American football. In 93, his last season, he led Florida State's football team to their first national championship, and he won a Heisman Trophy that year. But he was never drafted in the NFL, and many people believe that he was blackballed for being black.
Is this the most underrated multi-sport athlete of all time? In 1993, Florida State quarterback Charlie Ward had one of the greatest college football seasons ever. As a senior, he had the highest completion percentage in the country, throwing for over 3,000 yards with 31 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. He won Florida State their first ever national championship that year. And he won the Heisman Trophy with the 4th largest margin of victory ever. However, instead of preparing for the NFL draft after the football season, Charlie then joined Florida State's basketball team as the starting point guard. He averaged 11 points with 5 assists and 3 steals a game, and the team went all the way to the Elite 8. In April 1994, Ward should have been a top pick in the NFL draft. But teams were telling him that since he was only 6'2", he was too small to play quarterback at the next level. So Charlie made the decision that if he didn't get drafted in the first round, he wasn't going to the NFL. Nobody picked him in the NFL draft, but 2 months later, the New York Knicks selected him 26th in the NBA draft. He ended up playing 11 years in the league and made $35 million.
So to the answer to the question of the video, was Charlie Ward blackballed? Well, the answer is, well, no. I mean, he was not blackballed because his skin shade, because of his race. Charlie Ward was not a victim of racism. Charlie Ward was a victim of error. He basically came out in an era in which the NFL had their prototypical QB, who was a guy who was 6'3 plus, who was a pocket passer, who could sit in a pocket and read defenses. This was the prototypical quarterback that the NFL had. And again, it was for good reason. Not like they just had this, they had that stereotype for nothing. It existed for a reason. And Charlie Ward at 6'2", and being more of a running through a threat type of quarterback, he didn't fit the prototype. He was a running quarterback, and back then, running quarterbacks were not considered viable. Many people, including myself, thought the same and did not think that Charlie Ward would translate very well as a QB in the NFL for this very reason. Again, it wasn't just a race thing. It was a prototypical thing. Ward was not the prototypical QB that the NFL was looking for. And again, he went undrafted in the league. And the reason why, because he told the league that if he wasn't drafted in the first round to play quarterback, he was going to go to the NBA, which then teams didn't want to waste draft capital on a player who was not committed. Again, you draft players to bring players in to help you win. And if someone's on the fence like that, teams are going to stay away, and they did. He went undrafted in the NFL, and he went to the NBA, and what I hear, he had a pretty decent career in the NBA. But it was not racism. It was because he did not fit the prototypical QB that the NFL was looking for back then. Not the case today, because now we have plenty of dual threat quarterbacks. However, even though we have dual threat quarterbacks in the league, keep in mind, the overwhelming majority of all quarterbacks in NFL today are still the prototypical pocket passer. Now, of course, the race hustlers, the black victims, they won't accept anything. They're going to find every which way to cry racism. Somebody posed, to me, Tim Tebow. But what about Tim Tebow? Well, Tim Tebow was drafted in 2010, 16-year difference. So by that time, we were in a different era where the running quarterback or the dual threat quarterback was considered viable now. And many people also thought that Tim Tebow would be a horrible quarterback in the NFL. They thought that he was a college gimmick, and he had that very unorthodox throwing motion. Well, we turned out to be right, because he was drafted by the Broncos and turned out to be a bust. So the league the league has those stereotypes for a reason. And then they bring up Doug Flutie. Yeah, Doug Flutie was like barely, it was like 5'11" or something like that. However, here's the thing about Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie went to the Canadian League first. He wasn't drafted in the NFL. He had to go to the Canadian League to prove himself before he was given a shot in the NBA, in the NFL, not the NBA, but the NFL. Before he was given a shot in the NFL as a QB. Also, Doug Flutie, even though he had great scrambling ability, what he was known for, but he was still also a pocket passer. Doug Flutie was not a dual threat quarterback. He was still a pocket passer. So, in closing, Charlie Ward was not blackballed because of racism. Okay? He was not drafted in the league, or he was not considered viable in the NFL as a QB because he just did not fit the prototypical standard of what a QB was. And there were many players, including white QBs, who also suffered for the same reason. Again, if you look at college football, there have been running quarterbacks, veer option quarterbacks throughout all of college history. But they weren't expected to go to the NFL as a quarterback because that wasn't considered viable in the league. And even then, there's still no veer option quarterback in the NFL because NFL does not run veer option. They don't run the veer option. If they do, it'll be something gimmicky, but it's not the standard. It's not the standard scheme in the NFL. Okay, now I would say this: if Charlie Ward would have had that '93 season, if he had that season instead in 2025, he would have been the #1 draft pick in the 2025 draft. He would have been the #1 draft pick, hands down, and it wouldn't have been any argument. The problem is that that's 32 years. That's a 32-year gap. Completely different era. So once again, it was not racism against Charlie Ward. It was the viability of the type of quarterback he was. Because like I said, there are plenty of dual threat quarterbacks in the league today, even though the overwhelming majority are still pocket passers. So it's considered viable today. It just wasn't viable back then. That's all it was. It was not racism. So for those people who want to cry racism and say it's racism, either you're lying to yourself or you're not even old enough to live in that era. But the fact is, I remember that era. I'm old enough, and I can tell you, many people, like I said, including myself, didn't think Charlie Ward would be viable in the NFL for that very reason. That's all it is. It's not racism. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on this, and it's always until next time.